18 months ago, I spoke at the Davos Forum and I emphasized once again that the unipolar world order era was over. And I would like to take this issue up once again because it's still relevant, despite all the attempts to preserve the old world order. You know, it's only the natural course of history. Change is the natural course of history because civilizational diversity of the planet and the richness of cultures can hardly be reconciled with political, economic, and other ready-made templates. Templates won't fly there.
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. It's just me this week, Kimberly Gogan. Sunny is not here this week, so I am going to do the best that I can to give you the real news today. So we'll start out with some regular news. We just saw Putin's speech was given today at the World Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, and Putin declares the world stage is changing. I'm going to have to read this because I don't have a teleprompter, so sorry. The world stage is changing, and the quote, unipolar world theater can no longer sustain himself. I can't say that I disagree with that. He goes on to say that sanctions have been released in a very short little segment of this speech, and we kind of almost roll over it. But what does exactly that mean? Okay, so the official statement is food security is an interesting issue. In relation to Russia, sanctions are formally not covering the Russian exports of food. Formally, and this is the key word, the U.S. Department of Treasury has even issued a general license which allows businesses to conduct financial transactions even with sanctioned Russian persons if these transactions are related to food security, to grain, or any other kind of food. However, businesses are very scared. Businesses are convinced that it is easier to completely abandon dealings with Russia as such rather than face the enforcement of secondary sanctions from the United States. Well, this is really interesting. So today I'm going to talk a lot about food shortages because it's on everybody's mind. It's on every single channel everywhere. BlackRock is threatening food shortages and Americans need to feel pain. Farmers are having issues. So let's talk about why this is all pretty much made up by the deep state in order to create world domination or control or whatever the order the Black Sun's looking for today. So, okay. So why are farmers all over the world not taking advantage of the fact you can still get oil and gas directly from the Russian government, right? Or they're all in part kind of owned by the government and partially privately owned by people who are still the government. So why is nobody taking advantage of buying oil or gas, especially farmers and perhaps even truckers that are driving food supplies all around the world and all around the country? Why are they not buying directly from the Russians? Now, I'm going to make this point very clear. Your government is not going to do it for you. They are not going to make the deal. However, understand, if it is in relation to food security in any way, then you can buy directly. So that means truckers, if you happen to be transporting food items of any kind in relation to national food security, you can buy oil or diesel directly from the Russian government. So if you own a trucking company and you supply fuel to your drivers, you can buy direct. You can do a long-term production contract even if you are transporting any kind of item that could even remotely be considered food. And this is not only in the United States, but this is all over the world. You can pay for these goods and services in United States dollars or in euro because this is accepted globally. It's not just the US Treasury as it relates to food security. If you are on the African continent and you're experiencing a shortage of urea or other farming products that are necessary, other fertilizers or whatever it is you're normally getting from the Russians that is driving prices allegedly ridiculously high, right? Because they're all claiming that it's the Russian sanctions that are the biggest problem. Well, not really, not exactly. But let's go on with the fictitious narrative here. You can buy directly from the Russian government. You do not have to call your government. You do not have to ask permission. You can pick up the phone and you can order diesel or whatever is necessary for your farming equipment, and you can go direct. Stop waiting for your governments to help you, because they're not going to. Right now, they're more concerned about helping themselves, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. So again, if you require diesel, you require fuel to transport food, to make food, to farm, for agriculture, for cattle ranchers, you can go direct and you can buy at the same prices that our government pays currently from the Russian government and has for years. Now, there were some deals that were made, those contracts have expired, that demanded that the governments would get, especially the US government, would get oil basically almost for free from the Russians, right? And that's where our stockpiles come from. We have 10 years of stockpiles for the military in oil and gas. Word on the street is they're selling some of that stuff off right now so that they can have money to function. But just be aware that you can pick up the phone, you can call direct, you get your own diesel, and it can be imported into the United States securely, and you should have no issues and no problems, or any other country for that matter. So if you don't know, it's Rosneft, and there's a number of other companies that produce oil and gas in Russia. You can also, which will significantly decrease your price, because we're kind of going around the Seven Sisters now. The Seven Sisters being the 7 largest oil and gas companies in the world, provide you with fuel. In South America, we did a little expose on the one there. But like, again, don't worry about them, because there are no sanctions if you are concerned about food security, or you are in any way transporting food, or even possibly selling food, right? Okay, so that also applies to grain. So if you are a rancher and you have cattle and you need to feed the cattle, you can buy directly, and you're going to bypass the commodities futures market, the derivatives market that BlackRock created, and you can just get your grain at a much cheaper price than even the current market prices by going directly to the farmers in Russia that are growing one of the world's largest suppliers, I should say, one of the world's largest producers of grain. I am no Sunny, guys. I'm telling you, can't wait till she comes back next week. She pulls this off, nobody else can. Okay, so all this in the name of global food security, but what are they trying to do? So this goes back to the Black Sun slave heads of state and the fear the CIA has instilled in the world to ensure their already failed plans of ushering in the third horseman of the apocalypse, famine, and keeping the BlackRock's already failed commodity derivatives alive. Okay, so we talked about calling them directly. Let's see, if you all call directly, so there are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of farmers worldwide. If you all call them directly, then there are way too many of you for the CIA to actually get rid of. Now, they can focus on heads of state and don't buy this, don't buy that, don't let people in your country get this, don't import these goods. But that really doesn't make a difference when there's hundreds of thousands of you calling. Because Putin did make it very clear further on in the speech, and you can find the speech online, that they are open for business, especially as it relates to food security. Now, on a side note, this week, we also made a proposal to the Russian owners of these same companies for the sake of farmers. We agreed to take an enormous production contract in commodity related to food security and pay for those large, enormous, that's for you, CIA, enormous food security related items in rubles, with the goal to back it, which came from Russia originally, and pay for the transportation directly to the farmers and ranchers in need for free. Now, if you are a farmer or a rancher and you're interested in this contract, we'll have a way for you to contact us. However, you will be required to give the same value, not this ridiculous hyperinflated value, but the same value in food items directly to the consumer and to the people in your specific community first. So if you were normally paying 20 or something, then it's $20 in food, not this hyperinflated, ridiculous price. So you are now going to cut out the middleman by providing food and meats directly to the people of your community and within a certain mile radius, because gas prices are ridiculous. And it's a win-win for the farmer, right? Because they're going to be getting paid now much, much more than they were being paid by the people with the production contracts in the past, because they don't pay. So the farmers will end up thriving. The people will end up thriving by lowering their food prices beyond what they have now. So again, in Russia's quest to become monetarily independent or interdependent, they want to return to a gold-backed ruble. This also solves their issue. And then this also solves the problem of the issuance of new rubles. And by backing it with production contracts, and we've talked a lot about this in the past, by backing it with production contracts, we now have a win-win situation all around for the Russians and for us, right? For the Alpha system, money starts flowing again, and we can afford to pay for that. The farmers will have no issues with getting it direct. And we have actually transferred ruble, myself personally, directly to the Russian central bank several times in the past and in the recent past. So it is available. It is there. Take it or leave it, Russians. We hope to find out the answer to that question a little later on this week. Okay. So the deep state for sure has made a total mess of the four horsemen of apocalypse theater. Putin even states in his speech that this is all a theater, including military theater. We have actors forgetting their lines, speaking of theater, and yes, you, Biden, actors playing more than half of the political and economic world leaders around the world who are already dead, hoping to keep some shred of the illusion of to keep their theater goers interested in the deep state show. But there's a much bigger picture going on here now, isn't there? So those of you that are watching this already know. But let's talk about food shortage orchestration and the third horseman of the apocalypse, famine. Okay, last year on this network, we talked a lot about drought payments that were promised to by the federal government to farmers here in the United States. Also, they were promised to local farmers by the water boards. And for those of you that don't know what a water board is, that is the board that governs over water rights and says who can have how much water and how much water is provided to the city, what the cost of water is. Now, the funny part is the water boards are also known to all of us as CIA operatives on U.S. ground. Same thing as those people with the U.S. Marshal badges, but they just carry water board badges. And it's kind of fun that they all take over the water board because they are the creators of the extreme interrogation technique called waterboarding. They must really like water over there. Also, let's see, the drought payments were very significant, and they were often 2 to 3 times the average grain farmer would be paid per acre for a crop. However, unfortunately, many farmers took the payment and agreed not to produce the crops because of the drought and fires. What is even worse is none of them even received the payments, and this year it is ridiculously expensive to farm. Due to the rising cost in grain, fertilizers, and of course, gasoline or petrol, depending on where you are, some farmers decided not to plant crops. Check out what this farmer had to say.
So a piece of the conversation that I have not even touched base on is the farmers who do have fields planted. Okay, there are some farmers who just decided that it was not worth the input cost to even plant. Okay, but the farmers who did plant, let me also explain to you, the bushels might be down this year, which is obviously meaning that we're not going to have as much to send out. So the reason that is happening is because they skimped down on fertilizer, guys. Fertilizer prices in some areas went up over 200% in the last year. Okay, so they had to skimp down than what they regularly were putting on their fields. So take that into consideration when I talk about what is going to be out there this fall and what is happening and when prices go up, why else that might be, and that will be a part of this conversation.
She goes on further to say, we will see a significant decrease in food in our grocery stores by the end of this year. Check this out.
So I got in a conversation today, and the woman, honestly, bless her heart, honestly thinks that food prices are not going to go up. She thinks that this is the highest they're going to go. I tried to explain to her that that was not the case, that they are absolutely going to go up even more. And I told her there are things that like we have to buy. There's something we had to buy that 2 years ago cost us $24. Last year was about $46. This year it is costing us $96. Okay, local farmer, 50 head of cattle. It's costing him $8,000 a month to feed them. Please understand, food prices are going to go up. You want to act like it's the farmer's fault. It is not the farmer's fault. We're barely making it to grow the stuff so you guys are able to get it in August, September, October. Okay? Guys, this is not going away. Stop sticking your head in the sand and thinking, oh, it's going to be okay. It's not going to fucking be okay.
Yeah. So obviously she's pretty upset. The rising prices, they can barely farm. And this has been the case for a long time, but with this new sanctions, which never solved a problem anywhere ever. And there have been sanctions that have been in existence for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It's the most ridiculous thing. And the countries are still doing what they said they were going to do. There's no change in anything other than the fact that all the production line contracts are issued in US dollars and typically are all sold to companies like Vanguard and BlackRock. Okay, so either way, what big box and grocery stores pay to farmers and ranchers is pennies compared to what we are paying. Now imagine if we weren't paying a big box store or grocery store and we were paying the farmer direct. We get farm boxes directly from farmers, and that would help compensate for the rising prices in fertilizer and gasoline or petrol, depending where you are. Okay, now we also have food zigzagging all over the planet. So food is produced in, say, Mexico. California farmers are told not to farm. The Oregon farmers aren't getting their water rights due to the water board. Yeah. So it's all a big plan. This is not new. This is tied. This has been many years in the making, and ties to something called the Armistice Agreement, which is an agreement underneath the Order of the Black Sun, which originated in 1972. So good news is this agreement expires in just a few short days. And you'll see further changes going on all around the world. All right, so these planned food shortages actually began to see the light of day a couple of years ago. We saw Gates buying farmland all over the world. Same thing as the Bush Foundation did years ago, and the Clinton Foundation, if you're in Africa. You saw the Bushes and the Clintons. So this is, you know, we've all known that the global takeover and the control of food, we had the salting of the lands in Ethiopia by the World Bank in 1980, I think it was 4. If you're a young kid growing up in America, you probably remember those starving children in Africa commercials that we saw every 5 minutes. Yeah, that was the World Bank that did that. Great job. So that they would become dependent on other food sources and other food supplies. Why Ethiopia? Well, Ethiopia was the breadbasket of all of Africa. They produced more food for the entire continent than any other country at that time. They also did the same thing in Mozambique. They cut down all the cashew trees, which take 50 years to regrow and bear nuts. So they moved all of the central control, I guess you would say, of cashews over to Malaysia and their partners, the Knights of Malta. So this is nothing new around the world. This has been going on in many countries. The only difference here is we're seeing more and more of it in rising prices at the grocery stores, which they also control. So you've got to take food supply into your own hands. Like I said, Call your farmers. This is a call to action to all of you that are watching this. Call your local farmers. Try to make deals for food boxes. You'll pay in advance. Maybe that will help them with some of their rising costs if you can have a box delivered every single week directly from farm to table. Don't buy into the third horseman of the apocalypse plan by CIA. We all know about it. That agreement expires in a couple of days. There's been no funding for it. It even gets worse for them this week, and we'll go on to that in just a few minutes. But I'm really more concerned about you watching this, you and your family, you and your children and your grandchildren. If you don't know how to can, learn how to can. So as we go forward here, we're going to have the last dying breaths of some ridiculous plans that did not take place, in part due to the work that we've all been doing here and other people in the world. And everybody is ready to move forward. And so far, very few have figured it out. The Russian generals of the Black Sun know that the Order of the Black Sun has lost. Today was a very important day for the people in Eastern Europe, as a very old agreement, over 1,000 years old agreement that was made between the Russians and the Carpathians at the time. Carpathians were, let's just say, very heavily tied to the Destroyer, or the ultimate black magician that we talk about. And we talk about that in the Real History of the World, and part 2 should be out soon. I hope you're enjoying it. But this was very, very important. And to Russians, today's speech by Putin was very important. He had some choices, or they, the people behind him, had some choices to make as to what he was going to talk about. And clearly, he is on the side of trying, or they are, I should say, the people behind it, are on the side of Russia rebuilding, moving forward, and kind of leaving their old order days behind, because the order is pretty much just about done. And we'll go into that in a second when we start talking about the intel for the week. So, okay. Yes, so everybody is pretty happy about that old agreement, 1,008 years old. It expired today, probably at midnight. Anyway, it was signed so long ago. There was a czar in Russia. Let's see. This agreement gave the Black Sun a lot of reign over the Russian Empire of the day, and hence fighting with the Ukrainian Nazis, also tied to the Order of the Black Sun and the Rothschildians, as I call them, or the dragon families around the world. Okay, so in, I guess you would say, other news, so food shortages, is it a real thing? They're really going to give it a go. This week, we also had another baby formula factory, stop production due to, heat or something ridiculous. This is just the CIA calling around, trying to enforce that horseman of the apocalypse mentality. So the calls that they're getting are not real. If you have a baby formula producing factory, these are not actual real situations that who knows, they could say they work for the FDA, the Treasury Department, the food police or whatever, the baby formula people, but they're not. They're not U.S. Marshals. They are deep state actors trying to get you to starve our children. Either way, we've all figured out ways to make our own formula and our own baby food. And who knows if the American Pediatric Association is even correct that this should be the only food that a child can eat, and at what age. So, I don't know. Really, they only matter if you're listening, right? If we don't mind them, they don't matter. This is a case of mind over matter. Let us not forget that. All right, so going into my notes for this week. So it's been